Hey, I'm EJ Hassenfratz for School of Motion. In today's video, I'm going to be covering the main differences between the Lite and Studio versions of Cinema 4D. There's a lot of confusion out there as to what version does what version you need, and that's what we're going to be covering in this video today. One of the things a lot of people don't know is that if you own a subscription to Creative Cloud, you actually own a copy of Cinema 4D, and it's that Cinema 4D Lite version. The thing is it's a little hard to get to, and the reason for that is you actually have to open Cinema 4D Lite through After Effects. I know it's a little weird, but here's how you open up Cinema 4D Lite. You just go in After Effects, go to File, New, Maxon Cinema 4D File, and once you jump on that, it will then prompt you to save an untitled default file. I'm just going to save this to the desktop, and I've done this before, so I'm just going to replace that. And what's going to happen is that's going to launch Cinema 4D Lite. So boom, you now have a copy of Cinema 4D that you have full access to as long as you have your Creative Cloud subscription access, which is pretty cool. So you might be thinking, all right, I'm all set here. I have a version of Cinema 4D. Why would I need to shell out my cold hard cash for the full studio version when I have Cinema 4D already? So that's what we're going to be talking about in this video, and talking about the differences between Lite and Studio. So let's go ahead and begin by talking about what is included in the Lite version of Cinema 4D. Alright, so the first thing you're going to notice is we have the full-blown Cinema 4D interface, and mostly this is the same as what you would see in Cinema 4D Studio version. So in this regard, Lite is really great for getting used to how Cinema 4D works and where everything is, as well as just kind of navigating around in 3D space. So we have most of the menus that we have in Studio. We have our primitives menu where you can create basic 3D shapes. We have the pen tool where you can actually draw spline shapes, and we have all these different spline shape objects here as well. And basically, splines are the Cinema 4D equivalent of like After Effects path. So we can get the pen tool here, just kind of draw a little blobby here, and voila, there you go. Actually, I like the pen tools in Cinema 4D a little bit better than I like in After Effects, actually. It's pretty intuitive. But so once you create splines, outside of creating these basic 3D shapes, using splines and what's called generator objects, and Lite has a small selection of some of the generator objects that Studio has. And basically what generator objects do is allows you to create geometry based on splines. So I have like an extrude here. We all know what extrude is. You have it in After Effects, but basically you can place a spline as a child of the extrude object, and boom, we have some 3D geometry that if I hit this button that renders the current active view, you can see, hey, we got some geometry. Look, Mom, 3D'ing. But basically, like, creating these basic shapes, creating splines, and then creating geometry based off those splines using generators is two of the only ways you can create geometry in Cinema 4D Lite, unless you actually import in a model. The modeling tools are not available inside of Cinema 4D Lite, so that's a thing. We have a lot of other generator objects like an array or a bool or an instance, which basically makes a copy or an instance of a single object. A bool can have you subtract or combine different pieces of geometry. So generating geometry, while we can't actually model anything, we have a lot of control and ability to create a lot of different types of geometry to build up your scene. So once you build geometry, you can then deform it using a selection of deformers, and it's just a select group of deformers that you'll find in Studio. It's a lot of the most used ones, so like bend, bulge, shear, taper. Wind's a really cool one if you want to create like a wavy flag or something like that, or animate a little fishy doing its thing. Twist, if you want to blow stuff up, get the TNT there. But a lot of stuff. And as far as, scene objects, we have the floor, we have like a fog environment, sky, foreground, stage object, which allows you to kind of animate between different camera views. And speaking of cameras, there's a selection of the type of cameras you can use. Again, most people use the basic camera, so That's really cool. You can look through it. You can change the focal length, all that good stuff, just like, you know, an After Effects camera. And then we have all of our lights. So this is pretty incredible that the free version that comes with After Effects of Cinema 4D has all of this stuff. I mean, you have no excuses to not learn 3D. And if you want to learn Cinema 4D, get used to the workflow. Again, get used to the menus, all that good stuff. This is a really great way to remove that barrier of like, well, I can't afford the full studio version right now. You have no excuse. This is what you get with a Creative Cloud subscription, and it is pretty substantial. It's pretty robust. So let me go ahead, and I have another project here that I made completely inside of the Lite version, and you can see what kind of scenes you can build up. I have all the lights here. We have area lights, which is one of the most accurate lights in Cinema 4D outside of the PBR light you can see here, physically based light. And there's an instance there. I got all these different objects. And basically what I've done in this scene is I've used either your basic primitive 3D shapes, okay, like your cubes, your torus, all that stuff, and then basically created different shapes using splines, and then used all these different generator objects to then build out the scene. So you can see this little cactus guy. This little pot is a lathe, and a lathe basically takes a spline and sweeps it around so you can create this little pot shape there. Same thing with this cup. If I just open that up, that is basically just a tube. And then to create the steam, I just made a sweep object with the circle as the profile spline. One of the cool things you can do with the sweep spline is you can adjust the scale of the sphere as it sweeps along that main spline here. Okay, and I have a wind object here that if I scrub through, you can see it creates this nice little wavy motion. So tons of ability of, you know, building up scenes and lighting scenes inside of Cinema 4D Lite, okay? So lighting is such a huge aspect of 3D, and guess what? This has all of the lighting tools that you ever need to build up that fundamental skill of lighting, which I feel like for newcomers to 3D, lighting is one of the weakest points for 3D artists, newcomers to 3D artists, just because you really don't have to think about that aspect of a scene when you're working in 2D, right? You're basically dealing with 2D shapes, and you don't need to learn about real world kind of lighting techniques and photography lighting and all that stuff, or, you know, photo studio lighting. So this has the ability to create all these objects. It also has the ability to animate stuff. So we got a full timeline here. You can set keyframes. Any keyframeable animation is possible inside of Cinema 4D Lite, which is really, really amazing. You can see we have all different types of textures here. I have a gold texture. So the material system is pretty robust. It has a lot of the same material creation functionality as the full studio version. We can get reflectance. If you like your shiny materials, guess what? This has that in there. We can utilize bump channels. We can use noise shaders. We have a wide selection of different effects you can use here. So you can, you know, use tiles, which is cut off at the bottom there. But tiles is something I use a lot. You can see that for the cactus stripes here. That's basically, I loaded a tile shader in the alpha, and if I go and just grab this render region here and just click and drag just to render my little cactus guy, you can see those little lines right there. So a lot of material options here. A lot of the most basic, most often used materials and material functions are inside of Lite. So again, if you want to get used to how a material system works in 3D, Lite is great for that. So back to animation, one of the most common features, or one of the most widely used features by motion designers in Cinema 4D is a little thing called MoGraph. Now, MoGraph, basically, you can see the little menu here. MoGraph allows you, in the studio version at least, to clone and create and animate loads and loads of objects very easily using what's called effectors. So effectors basically can allow you to do a multitude of things. Inside of Cinema 4D Lite, you have access to the plane and random effectors, and you only have access to this if you register your Cinema 4D Lite version, so be sure you do that, and you can have access to the plane and random effector and this fracture object. And basically what the fracture object allows you to do is make objects be able to be used by or be manipulated by these plane and random effectors. So for example, I have these little cube objects here. Let me just go into my scene. There's my plane effector. Basically, you can see this fall off is a couple planes here. If I just move this through, you can see that this plane effector, I have this set up to scale everything down. So as I pass this through, I can adjust and manipulate the position, scale, and rotation values of those objects. So I can turn on the position, I can turn on the rotation. Let's just move this a little bit over here. I can make this rotate a little bit. So basically just by keyframing this little fall off, I got all of this animation happening. And this is again, the main used feature. This feature put Cinema 4D on the map, basically. The only downside about the Lite version is you only get a select few, just a tiny fraction of the ability and functionality of MoGraph. You don't have a cloner object, which clones objects very easily, and you don't have a lot of the most powerful aspects of the MoGraph module. So there's that. So again, with Lite, you have the ability to do basic modeling, not like polygon modeling or anything like that. I'm talking just, using generators and building your main objects and, using a bool, all that good stuff. You can deform those pieces of geometry as well. So you can do that. You can use lighting, you can texture, you can animate, and these are the most fundamental aspects of 3D, which is super awesome that all this is able to be done inside of Lite. So the one major thing you can't do, and it's kind of a biggie, if I go to my render settings here, you cannot save out an image from Cinema 4D Lite. So you might be wondering, well, that completely stops me from working at this. Like, I don't want to build this scene and then I have no way to render out my scene here. You might be thinking that, like, what's the point then? Well, there's actually a workaround. Okay, so let's just go ahead and jump into After Effects. All right, so here we are in After Effects, and one of the cool things about Cinema 4D in general is the powerful integration with After Effects. So one of the cool things is you can actually import a Cinema 4D file here. So I'm going to go and grab my Cinema 4D Lite scene demo. Again, you have access to this file, so go ahead and download it so you can follow along. And I'm just going to open this, okay? And you're going to see that the Cinema 4D file imported into After Effects just like any other asset or footage. And basically what I can do now is just drag and drop this, make a new composition in here, and basically, boom, we have our Cineware layer right here, and we can see our Cinema 4D Lite scene inside of After Effects, which is really awesome. So Cineware is basically an effect that allows you to view your Cinema 4D scene in an After Effects comp, and this is the way you could then render out your Cinema 4D scene. So here we have the different renderers. Right now we have the software renderer, which basically just shows you the same kind of view that I just showed you inside of Cinema 4D. But the one thing you can do is choose the different types of renderers. So standard renderer is, it's aptly named, it's the standard render inside of Cinema 4D. And here you can see everything all nice and lit and all this good stuff. And this is the draft version, but if you crank this up and change this to standard final, basically what you're gonna get is the final resolution of this scene. And basically what's gonna be happening in the background is Cinema 4D is gonna be rendering that scene or that image, that frame, and then importing it into After Effects. And then at that point, you can just render out either that animation, or in my case, I just have a still image, still scene. So you can go ahead and render through After Effects. I know it's a little bit of a workaround, but that's how you can go ahead and render all of your beautiful art, 3D art from from Cinema 4D, bring it in After Effects, render it out, print it, put it on your refrigerator. Your mom will be really proud of you. So one of the really cool things about Cineware, in addition to just being able to, import a Cinema 4D file, view it in your After Effects composition, composite 2D elements on top of this, is we can actually, it's a live link, okay? So what that means is I can go over into, back into Cinema 4D Lite, okay? And let's just make a change here. Let's just say that we just gave a lot of plant feed to our cactus, and he got huge. He got really big, so I'm just gonna scale this guy up. He's super big now. So I made that change. What I'm gonna do is just go ahead and save this. Okay, save that file. And then let's jump back into After Effects. And if I go to a non-RAM previewed, or actually let me just go into my standard draft. Now if I go into a frame that's not already pre-rendered, you can see that already updated there, okay? And let's actually just go back to software, or even OpenGL, that's a good one too, and kind of see what this looks like here. So you can see that automatically updated, and now we have our huge cactus in here. So it's this live link. As long as you save all of your changes in your Cinema 4D Lite file, you can jump back into After Effects and just make sure you're not already in a RAM cached frame, and it'll then update, which is really, really cool. So another awesome thing with Cineware is you can see we can actually extract scene data from Cinema 4D. So if we jump back into Cinema 4D here, you can see that we have our cameras, we have our lights, and I have this null that's smack dab in the middle of the scene. It has an external compositing tag, and basically what an external compositing tag does is allows you to export the position information, position, scale, rotation information of a certain object in Cinema 4D, and we can even export this as a solid that will then come into After Effects as a solid or as a null. So I'm going to check on solids. It's going to come in as this red solid with a size of 200 by 100, and let's just go ahead. Let's go and save this again since I made that change to check on that solid, and let's hop back into After Effects. All right, so now with this updated, what I can do is go and extract not only the camera and lights from my Cinema 4D Lite project, but also that null. And this is a 3D layer inside of After Effects. So what I can do is go back into my Cineware layer, change this camera to, say, a comp camera, and what this will now use is the camera inside of After Effects. And now check this out. I'm gonna hit the C key and just orbit around this scene, and what I'm doing as this updates is I'm rotating the camera, and rotated it a little bit too much, but rotated the camera, and I'm orbiting, and it's actually orbiting the actual 3D scene from Cinema 4D Lite, which is pretty incredible. So I can do all my camera animation entirely inside of After Effects. Say I want to zoom in here, I'll just hit the C key to toggle to the zoom, and let's just zoom up into this solid layer, and there you go. Really cool stuff. Just the flexibility. I mean, this is what puts Cinema 4D on the map, is this tight integration with After Effects, okay? So a lot of stuff here. This is just kind of skimming the surface on the power there, but this is available. This functionality is available in Cinema 4D Lite. So it's just this integration, all the things you can do. It's such a huge selling point for Cinema 4D in general. All right, so that was a super quick overview of all of the features included in the Lite version of Cinema 4D. Let's go ahead and check out all of the features included in only the studio version of Cinema 4D. All right, so here's a little clip from an older tutorial of mine that's utilizing one of the most robust features for MoGraph artists in Cinema 4D. Again, I'm referencing that MoGraph module that, again, allows you to clone and animate objects in a variety of complex ways super easily. So again, MoGraph is why Cinema 4D is known today. It's so powerful. It is such a huge workflow enhancer as far as motion graphics go. Put Cinema 4D on the map way back when this came out about I don't know, 10 years ago. So while Cinema 4D Lite does have some of those basic elements of MoGraph, like I showed you with the fracture object and the plane and random effectors, you are missing out on a majority of the powerful animation features that come with the full studio version. And on the subject of animation, if you're into, animating characters in After Effects, fortunately, character rigging and animation is not supported in Lite either. So here's another example of a feature that's not included in Cinema 4D Lite, and it's actually one of my favorite features to play around with, and that is the powerful Dynamics engine. So Dynamics is the real-world physics engine inside of Cinema 4D Studio that allows you to add physics to your objects, allowing the objects to fall, collide, squish, and inflate, among other things. It's extremely easy to do and super, super powerful. And if you spend any time on Instagram, I'm sure you see types of these animations all over the place every single day. Another really cool thing that is part of Dynamics, it's a separate engine, it's called Cloth, and allows you to make really cool clothy types of animation, again, not included in Lite. All right, so let's move on to another feature that, again, is only in Studio, and that's a fairly new feature to Cinema 4D, just got added in version R20, and it's called volume modeling, which is a really amazing feature that allows you to model organic meshes super easily by simply combining shapes together to form a more complex piece of geometry and model things that otherwise would have been super difficult to model the traditional polygon modeling way. And one of the coolest parts is you can utilize volumes with some of those MoGraph features I talked about off the top to create some really interesting animations like this cool liquid reveal. So speaking of modeling, again, I want to reiterate that polygon modeling is not available in Lite, but is in Studio. And this is the traditional way to create geometry using the modeling tools as well as sculpting tools that are in Cinema 4D Studio. So outside of that, you're pretty limited to what kind of geometry you can create in Cinema 4D Lite, as again, you can only generate those basic 3D shapes, those primitive shapes, and then create splines and extrude them and lathe them. But you cannot manipulate that polygon geometry at all outside of those basic geometry deformers like bend and twist. So it'd be kind of like being able to create an After Effects shape layer, like a rectangle, but not being able to add more points or edit those points to create your own custom shape layer. So that is pretty limiting, but as I showed you, there is a ton of geometry you can make just by combining different types of those primitive 3D shapes together with things you can generate based off of splines. So some of the other major things that aren't included in Lite are the ability to utilize advanced render engines like Physical Renderer, Pro Renderer, and third-party render engines like Redshift and Octane that are becoming industry standards that allow you to render scenes, especially photorealistic scenes, way faster than standard render engine that is included in Cinema 4D Lite. So many of the advanced material shaders aren't included in Lite either, so you're pretty limited to the types of materials you can create, but you still have a lot of ability there. And if you like to create cel-shaded, cartoony renders, unfortunately, that sketch and tune render, which I really love to use, that turns your 3D renders into cartoony, outlined renders, is not included in Lite either. So speaking of third-party things like renderers, Cinema 4D Lite does not allow you to install or use any plugins. So anything from Grayscale Gorilla, or if you've heard of X Particles, which is a popular particle and dynamic system that's becoming industry standard for a lot of Cinema 4D artists, all of those things will not be usable. No plugins whatsoever. So that's kind of a biggie. All right, so that covers some of the major differences between Lite and Studio versions of Cinema 4D. And like I said before, one of the most important things about the Lite version is that if you're wanting to learn Cinema 4D, it removes any excuses of you not actually learning Cinema 4D. If you have a Creative Cloud subscription, boom, you have a version of Cinema 4D that for beginners is perfect because, again, you have the full interface or most of the interface. You can get used to how Cinema 4D works, the workflow. You can learn the lingo, the terms. You can get into getting used to navigating in 3D space, creating in 3D space, animating, get your lighting fundamentals, your materials. All that stuff is perfect for beginners. And before you even get onto an advanced version, those are all those fundamental skills that you'll need to succeed anyways, no matter what version of Cinema 4D or whatever 3D software you're using. Things like lighting is a huge thing for you to be able to practice in Cinema 4D Lite. So get your feet wet, learn the lingo. Lite's perfect for that. But if you are in any way serious about getting into 3D, adding it to your production workflow, there's no question that you absolutely need the studio version, because the studio version has a lot of the advanced features that you will need to stay competitive in this current 3D market. So hopefully this video gives you a little bit more insight into which version of Cinema 4D is best for you. And if you're completely new to Cinema 4D, or if you've been using Cinema 4D for a while and you just aren't quite getting it, you've been watching YouTube videos or tutorials and you're not quite understanding what all the different functions are that those tutorial artists are using, or you just don't feel that comfortable in 3D, I have a course on School of Motion called Cinema 4D Basecamp that takes you from zero to Cinema 4D artist in just a few weeks. And it's going to teach you all of the really important foundational skills that you need to be successful as a Cinema 4D artist and stay ahead in the motion graphics industry. Now, this is a course that I developed that I wish I had when I started learning Cinema 4D years and years and years ago, as it really will set you apart from everyone else as far as just getting those fundamentals. Again, things like lighting, super important. Not a lot of people understand. This will teach you some of those fundamental skills to have your work look so much better than it could have otherwise. So if you've been holding out on learning Cinema 4D, definitely check out Cinema 4D Basecamp. You can find it on the School of Motion courses page, or you can find the link in the video description here. By the way, when you sign up to Cinema 4D Basecamp, you have a limited time access to the educational version of the full-blown studio version with all of the advanced features that you can use during the class. So that is a huge thing. You'll be learning in that full studio version with all of those features at your fingertips that I just showed you in this video. So how's that for a perk, right? Well, hopefully I'll see you in an upcoming Cinema 4D Basecamp session. Thank you so much for watching.